Hola! We've spent the last couple of weeks working on using el pretérito and el imperfecto, which are the two main past tenses in Español that we use to talk about what people did or what they used to do. We're going to be reviewing today when we use el pretérito and when we use el imperfecto. You need to take accurate notes. You'll be asked to pause the video multiple times, very briefly, to complete some examples that are in your notes packet, and make sure that you take down all information. Let's begin. Starting with el pretérito. What you have here is a mnemonic device that can help us to remember when we use the pretérito. The mnemonic device that we have here is SCAP, or single completed action in the past. This term is something that a lot of teachers here use at Framingham High School and that you may have heard from teachers in Spanish 2 or 3, depending on who you had. When you're asked on a quiz, on a test, or on a worksheet why el pretérito was used, it will always be okay, at least in my class, for you to answer with SCAP. In other words, it happened once, it's over, and it's done with. However, there are more details that you should be aware of when you are working with el pretérito and el imperfecto, because there can actually be specific reasons, more specific reasons, why we use el pretérito. The most obvious one, as already stated, is it happened once. The next thing that could be is something that happened at a specific time, an event that took place on a specific day, something that happened in a specific month or during a specific year, or something that happened at a certain time of day. You can also use el pretérito to talk about things that happened a few times but then stopped happening, or something that happened a few times but not often, really just once in a while. What you should do now, pause el video brevemente, pause the video briefly, and complete the tres ejemplos on la primera página. Sally, leave him. Connor. Sorry about that little brief interruption. I had to deal with making sure that there was no altercation between the cat and the dog. But what you need to do is pause the video and complete the 3 sentences on la primera página, los tres ejemplos, of this little notes packet, con la conjugación correcta del verbo en el pretérito, with the correct verb conjugation en el pretérito. Make sure that you check your work with me if you're not 100% certain that you have things right. Once you're done, unpause the video and move on to el imperfecto. Okay. Reasons why we use the imperfecto are a little more detailed. We do have a mnemonic device for el imperfecto, and the mnemonic device that we use is DARTS. DARTS, D stands for description, A for action in progress, R for repeated actions, T for time, and S for simultaneous actions, in other words, 2 or more things happening at the same time. Be aware that when you need to use a verb in el imperfecto, you will be required to provide one of these more detailed descriptions. Just writing down DARTS is not quite going to work here, because the reasons why we use the imperfecto are more detailed in how they're described. When we're talking about description, it's going to have to do with someone's appearance, their emotions, the weather, and also providing background information. If you're ever setting the scene in the story, that's description, describing what was going on, who was around, what was happening. Pause el video brevemente, okay, pause the video briefly, and do the 2 examples on página 2, ejemplos A y B. When you're set, unpause the video and continue on. The next one is an action in progress, or the imperfecto progresivo, imperfect progressive. This is a lot like el presente progresivo, the present progressive, that you learned in Español 2, where you have a conjugation of the verb estar followed by the equivalent of the ing form of a verb in Español. So viajando, as you see in the example that you have here, is an example of a present participle. The example you have here is Ernesto estaba viajando por América del Sur. Ernesto was traveling through South America. You need to pause the video and write down el ejemplo for this section on página 2. When you're done, continue on. We now move on to acciones repetidas, or repeated actions. We're talking here, of course, about things that happened multiple times in the past, and what you really need to be aware of when we're talking about repeated actions are las palabras claves, or keywords. Some keywords you need to be aware of, and that will cue you in to that you're talking about a repeated action, are siempre, always, nunca, never, todos los días, every day, cada día, another way of saying every day, and muchas veces. Pausa el video y completa el ejemplo de esta sección al final de página 2. Moving on to time, we're talking about a few different things here. We have the hour, por ejemplo, eran las 11:30. The date, because technically, at least the calendar days and months are cyclical, they do repeat themselves. Era el 3 de noviembre. And also, we use el imperfecto for age. Yo tenía 13 años. Pause the video one last time. Haz el ejemplo al principio, at the beginning of página 3. Then unpause the video to complete the last bit of information. Finally, we're finishing up with simultaneous actions. 2 or more things happening at the same time. The big palabra clave or keyword here is mientras, which means while. So if you see mientras in a sentence, it's going to be a good hint for you to use el imperfecto, and that the reason is simultaneous actions. If simultaneous is going to be hard for you to remember, you are certainly welcome to write down at the same time or 2 things at the same time. That will always be 100% acceptable. Now, stop the video, complete the final little ejemplo on página 3, and then move on to some of the practice games and activities. Gracias.